Welcome to today's webinar on accountability in community consultation and impact measurement. My name is Bridget McIntosh, and I'm a cultural planning project coordinator at Steps Public Art, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes to share. If you are having any technical issues or trouble with hearing or seeing the presenters or the slideshow, please let us know by using the chat function, which is an icon that appears at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you move your mouse over that window, you'll be able to see that and add in your questions or concerns in that, not questions, but concerns or technical issues in that chat. Speaking of questions, we will be using the Q&A function, which you'll also see at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar for all questions and discussions that are related to the content of this webinar. Again, that's also an icon at the bottom of the screen. And just to differentiate between questions about the webinar and any technical questions and introductions, please use the chat just for introductions and for any technical concerns that you have. We want to make sure that all of the questions and discussions about the content are in that Q&A feature. The facilitators from Park People will be monitoring these online questions, and we encourage you to ask questions and participate specifically in that Q&A period, which will follow after the presentations. We would certainly love to hear from you, so please do keep track of your questions as we proceed through the presentation. And if for any reason, because we do have such a full agenda, if we don't manage to get to all the questions that are shared today, Park People will be working afterwards to get these answers and to share them to everyone who has registered for the conference. So again, please do share all your questions. We will try to get through as many as we can, but we will endeavor to follow up afterwards with answers. You'll see that today's webinar is also being recorded, and it will be available on the Park People website for future reference. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm going to hand things over to Wesley Reibling from Park People shortly, just to give you an overview of how the presentations will work. Wesley will do a land acknowledgement and provide some information about Park People. I will then be doing an introduction about the session and introducing our speakers. Each panelist will have a 15-minute presentation, and then after that, we'll have our Q&A session. So on that note, I am pleased to introduce Wesley Reibling from Park People to share a land acknowledgement and additional information about Park People. Wesley.
Thank you, Bridget. We would like to open today's webinar by acknowledging the land that we are gathered on and expressing our gratitude for its critical connection to the health of all. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and resilience of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people on this land, and we recognize their role as caregivers, stewards, and storytellers across Turtle Island. I am joining you today from Takaronto, Ontario. The city of Toronto is located on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Nishnawbe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We are honored to be able to gather together today, and we believe that parks should play a vital role in providing shared spaces for all people and are an important space for reconciliation and decolonization. We invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat window today with your name, your organization, and your nation's territory you're visiting us from. If you don't know which nation's territory you live or work in, we encourage you to visit nativeland.ca or Whose Land, which we've linked in the chat window. Thank you. For those of you who are new to the organization, or this is your first time joining a webinar or chat like today's, I wanted to give a moment to speak about Park People. So Park People helps people activate the power of parks to improve the quality of life in cities across Canada. Park People's national network provides comprehensive support to grassroots community groups, nonprofit organizations, and municipal staff across the country that are working to animate and enhance their local green spaces. Our network supports over 800 plus community groups and is the only network in the country dedicated to helping people do this type of work. Programs like this webinar aim to provide groups and organizations like you with the tools and inspiration you need to animate and improve your city parks and public spaces with community in mind. So I'll now pass it back to our moderator, Bridget McIntosh, to introduce this webinar and our panelists. But before I do, I just want to give a quick moment to her bio. So as a culture planning project coordinator with Steps Public Art, Bridget has been leading Shaping Space. It's a research initiative where communities across Canada have been engaged and consulted on how to create welcoming, equitable, and accessible spaces. This report and co-creation action plan is going to be shared very soon, FYI. And through her work as a cultural strategist, her consultancy practice is particularly focused on exploring the powers of intersectional collaboration and leveraging opportunities for cultural expression to be championed and meaningfully integrated into everyday life and protected through public policy. Please welcome Bridget.
Thank you so much, Wesley. So to provide some context for today's conversation, this topic is an incredibly multifaceted one. And there are so many community engaged voices that Park People has connected with and that they had hoped to include in today's conversation. You'll see as more programming is announced from Park People that many of these conversations will actually take place at Park People's National Conference in the spring, which we will share more information about later on. I also like to acknowledge before we begin that we are aware that this panel is comprised primarily of white voices. I do want to share that behind the scenes, many invitations were sent out and many rich conversations were had with Park People's partners, collaborators, and practitioners, which have helped to shape future presentations at the conference and for other spaces where diverse voices can continue to be heard and shared. In planning this session, it also reaffirmed what I'm sure many of us have encountered through our community engagement work, that sometimes just because you extend an invitation doesn't mean that it's automatically accepted, and also that people work and collaborate in different ways that is the most comfortable and effective for them. For example, this format, a recorded webinar, a public presentation that involves public speaking and presenting to the public, is not sometimes the most comfortable way for some people to share their work. Consultation fatigue is also very real, and everyone, especially those working in the nonprofit and community engagement sector, are overcommitted. I'd like to share that today's webinar, is just one part of ongoing work that Park People is doing to provide information and education to practitioners across Canada in a variety of different formats that are comfortable and effective for many. I'm happy to share that Park People is continuing to follow up on the many conversations that have emerged from the planning of this webinar, so that we have an opportunity to meet everyone where they're at and to find opportunities to share knowledge and to provide learning opportunities that can enrich all of our work. For today, though, I do want to acknowledge that we're very grateful that all of you have taken the time to join us today, and that you all bring your own lived experience and on-the-ground work in community engagement, which will only benefit and enrich today's conversation. So again, thank you. I'd also like to thank our speakers today who have joined us for making themselves and their specific perspectives and the rich work that they are doing to be accountable to the community available for us here today to learn from and to share. So to introduce them, first, in her 7 years as Better Block's executive director, Krista Nightingale has worked with neighbors in more than 75 cities to rethink streets, turn parking lots to plazas, and identify barriers keeping communities from enjoying their public spaces. The work has resulted in economic development, calmed streets, and has lowered crime rates. But most importantly, it brings neighbors together. Krista has led study tours in Dallas, Copenhagen, and Malmo, and built hundreds of digitally fabricated benches, kiosks, and survey stands. She uses her background in journalism to educate around placemaking and transportation, and she's a pretty adequate drone operator as long as there's no wood. So good on you, Krista. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Michelle Vanshu-Orozco. She holds a PhD in research methods and statistics and a postdoc on digitizing elder wisdom. In addition to her work with the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, doing business as the Alliance to End Homelessness in the Capital Region, Michelle volunteers and is a board member for Community Research Ethics Office, serves as the Vancouver Island Coordinator for the BC chapter of the Canadian Evaluation Society, and is the program chair of Statistics Without Borders, a volunteer outreach group of the American Statistical Association that provides pro bono services in statistics and data science. A quick note to add, we were looking forward to having Lisa Crossman from the Community Social Planning Council join us at today's presentation. She has shared with us how much she was looking forward to sharing her work with us today, but due to unforeseen circumstances, Lisa is unable to join us. But she has shared with us that as she works closely with Michelle and their work is quite entwined, Lisa has entrusted Michelle to share part of her work, specifically on relationship building at today's gathering. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Michael Ditor, apologies. Michael has worked as program coordinator and analyst for the community data program for the past 8 years. Over the last 20 years, he has worked on various knowledge sharing and monitoring initiatives that focus on the creation and dissemination of indicators to track local trends and inform policy, with a pause taken to return to school for a master's degree in applied science at École Polytechnique de Montréal. Finally, Sasha Moski is the training and capacity building coordinator with the community data program. In this position, Sasha works to increase the capacity of practitioners across Canada to make better use of intersectional and community-based data. Sasha also holds a Master's of Planning from Dalhousie University and has contributed her planning, research, and analytical skills to projects related to immigration, energy, poverty, housing, and climate resilience. Sasha is also based in Victoria, BC. And just moving on to some acknowledgements, I wanted to acknowledge that today's webinar was made possible from a generous support of an anonymous donor and by the Hillary and Galen Weston Foundation, TD, and Arterix. So now I'm pleased to hand the floor over to Krista Nightingale from Better Block Foundation to talk about their work in cutting the red tape that sometimes we create by piloting more nimble systems for now and for the future. Krista, over to you. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And good afternoon to everyone who is joining. I'm excited to be here with you and to talk a little bit about the work that we do. But more importantly, I'm excited to learn from everyone else about all the great things that they're doing and how we can apply some of that to what we're doing. So my name is Krista. I am the executive director of the Better Block, which is an urban design nonprofit, and we are based out of Dallas, Texas. Our work started about 12 years ago when our founding director, Jason Roberts, walked out onto this street in Dallas, and he and his neighbors asked, what can we do to make this street better? They wanted to add cafe seating, they wanted to add flowers, and just create a space where people could gather together. But they quickly learned that there were ordinances from the 40s prohibiting these things from happening. So it was $1,000 to add sidewalk flowers. It was area times market value times 85% times 12% to add street cafes. And there was actually an ordinance from the 40s that said it was illegal for people to gather on sidewalks here in Dallas. So Jason and his friends took a look at this, and they knew of this concept that at the time was kind of new, and it was called tactical urbanism. Just the idea of the community members being the ones to go out and to make the changes that they're wanting to see. So that's exactly what they did. For one weekend, they basically just took over their street. They painted bike lanes with kids paint and duct tape, knowing they could wash it off and remove it really quickly if they got in trouble. They rented some old streetlights, they put out some seating, and they had all these empty storefronts in the area. And they invited their neighbors who had been talking about having a business for years. And they said, hey, why don't you come out and just pop up for a weekend and let's just see what could happen. So they did all of these things. And then while they were doing them, they printed out those ordinances that they were breaking and they posted them in the windows. And they invited city staff to come take a look. And they said, we can't have this, we can't have the street life, we can't have these businesses as long as we have these ordinances in place. And they weren't sure how it was going to be received, but the city said, you know what, you're right. We do need to work and we need to make some changes. And over time, they did work to change some of those fees and update some of those ordinances. So Jason and his friends realized that there was a lot of beauty in the community being the ones to go out, to pilot some changes and to show what the barriers are. So they open sourced the concept of the Better Block, which has helped us spread around the country and around the world. We work in our Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, where we've taken our parking lot and we've turned it into a plaza. And we work to show folks that the young and the young at heart already have the tools, the resources, and the knowledge to make change. A lot of times we're just there to give a little nudge and to provide a little strategy behind it. We work really closely with digital fabrication to show folks how they can reshape their built environments using some tools that are in their backyards. So we have something called Wikiblock, which is an online library of street furniture designs that anyone, anywhere can download for free. You can cut them out with a CNC router, which are generally found at makerspaces. Most colleges have them, cabinet makers tend to have them. And then you can build these pieces of furniture without any glue, screws, or nails. So you can build them and instantly activate a sidewalk or turn a parking lot into a plaza. One caveat to it is that it is made with plywood, and plywood does have a lifespan. So it's not going to last forever. But what it does is it allows you to go out and test out a concept, test out some quick changes, and really see if that's something that the community would like to make more permanent. To give you an idea of what a project looks like, our whole process is 120 days. We move very quickly because we like to get people kind of out of that analysis paralysis, and most importantly, get them organized and get some action on the ground. So there are 4 things that we look for when we're looking at projects. The first we look at are the streets. And we ask, are the streets in this area serving the people? Or are they serving the passing through traffic? If the streets are only serving the passing through traffic, is there anything that we can do to start to reallocate that space from the cars back to the people? The second thing we look for is the commercial activity in the area. Are there small businesses there? If they are, how are they doing? Is there anything that we can do to help engage the sidewalks a bit more or to get folks inside? If there aren't any small businesses, are there folks in the area who would like the opportunity to test out their concepts and to be a small business there? The third thing we look for is the most important, which is the community. So whenever we're looking at projects, we always like to ask who is there and what are their motivations? Are folks frustrated by the lack of change that they're seeing in the area? And are they wanting to see something push forward? Are there folks who are concerned about the change that's coming to the area? And is there a way that we can help get them more organized so that they can head up that change? So we like to work with the community and put them in the lead of these projects and have them take the roles and bring about the change. The fourth thing that we look for is the ability for these projects to be permanent. So we deal in the world of temporary, and we like to say that temporary erases the fear of permanency. A lot of times we're working in pretty car-centric neighborhoods where when we start talking about taking away a parking space, it gets very dicey. And so we like to kind of just show people that, hey, when we reallocate that space, it's actually better for everyone. So when we do that temporarily, it allows us to really test out the concepts and most importantly, get people's feedback because they get to live in it, they get to breathe it, they get to feel it, and they get to be a part of it. So this is a project that we did in Akron, Ohio. And the idea here was that we extended the sidewalk and reclaimed some of that space. And then we created a parking protected bike lane. The idea was to slow down the traffic and create a more pedestrian friendly space. Also looking at the intersection area as well. One fun thing about our projects that sometimes happen, we always have community leaders. We have folks who are block captains who really take up the charge. This particular woman here, she ended up going through this 120-day process. She quit her job. She started a CDC, and that project that was 5 years ago has resulted in some pretty big changes. She has been able to get 13 businesses into the area. They have had 14 update their facades, and they've had more than $1 million in physical improvements. And this all came about from technically a 2-day demonstration. This is a project that we did here in Dallas, where we really started to look at what role can placemaking play in reducing crime. And what does it mean when a space is designed by the community with the community, and how can that start to impact crime? So this area is a higher crime neighborhood in the city of Dallas, but it's also incredibly wonderfully diverse and so dense as well. So there's a middle school up here in the corner where there's 180 languages spoken. And most of the kids come out from that middle school and they walk through this really gray space and they go into apartment buildings. So when we were approached, we were told that they had done everything they could think of from a policing standpoint to address crime in the area, but it still wasn't working. Was there anything that we could think of? So we worked with the community and we turned that spot into this. The first thing we did is we took away a couple right-hand turns so that the students had 2 fewer conflict zones to walk through. We also worked with the small businesses in the area to update their facades and remove the bars from the windows to open them back up to the community. And then, of course, we took just a handful of parking spots and we turned it into a plaza. We wanted to create a passive or active space and just let the community define how it is they want to use it. One simple tool is the shipping container here, where we can put all these little pieces inside. We lock it up. If a community member wants to rent the space, they just have the key code, they can bring everything out. And then the container itself becomes a little pop-up kiosk, or in this case, it actually became a little free library. So we had lots of plans for this community, or for this particular plaza. We installed it in 2019. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020. But what was interesting is the plaza took on a new life, and it became a place for the people to be and to go outside and to just enjoy the space in their areas. From a crime perspective, there were 10 to 15 incidents happening per week before we installed this project. As of September of last year, there had been 7 total. This is a project that we did recently in outside of Dublin, Ireland, and it was kind of the same approach, where we were told the big concern here was antisocial behavior by teenagers. And so we got to the site. It didn't look too bad, except that there was really nothing there except some old playground equipment that had been really used. And we realized 2 things. One, there was nothing being done because there's such a fear around if they did something, it would immediately be destroyed. We were told that over and over again. But we also realized that this place wasn't designed really for anyone. It was at one point for kids, but this was so worn down that that was no longer a thing. And we also realized that when the parents came out to the space, it kind of changed the entire environment. So we created a space where the parents could be. So we created this really simple pollinator garden with some benches and some seating so folks could come out and be there in the space. And then we added a shipping container where we took out all the walls and it became a stage so little kids could perform on it. And then, of course, we added a really colorful mural where people got to come be a part of it, help bring it to life, and just kind of freshen up the space overall. Like I mentioned, we like to use shipping containers as a tool in some of this work because we can make them super flexible. We can cut them in different ways. We can add electrical. We can have muralists come out and update them and reflect the community in each project that they're in. But we can also fill them with things that you need for placemaking events so that when you have a project, you can just get a couple volunteers out, set everything up, have your event, use the container as a kiosk or as a thrift store or as a brewery, whatever it is you may want it to be. And then at the end, you just pack everything up and you ship it back off to the next project. So why do temporary? Why invest in something that won't last forever? We have found that the impact actually is lasting. And what we see, a big part of the work is an increase in community engagement. Earlier, there was discussion about trying to meet people where they are and also meeting people when they're available. Throughout our whole process, we're trying to engage with people on different levels. Sometimes it's simple surveys. Sometimes they're part of the core volunteer team. Sometimes they're a vendor who's going to be a part of the demonstration. A lot of times it's people who are just driving by and they're seeing people paint in the street and they want to know what's going on. It is amazing how many times those conversations turn into people coming back later with their family, and then they all start painting together. So we really want to try to engage with people, and the entire process that we're working on is all about feedback. At no point do we ever consider anything we do to be done, because there's always a community member who's coming in and they're iterating on whatever it is that's being put out there. And quite frankly, they're coming up with a million better ideas than we had ever thought of. We also see street changes happening in days rather than decades after our projects. We like to test out these concepts. Again, we're working in pretty car-centric neighborhoods. And so when we're testing out this idea of reallocating space, it's very scary. But when we actually get to test it, people start to see that it is something that could be more beneficial in the long run. We see programming continue. We see community partnerships and increases in street life. But one thing that I really love seeing is a change in perceptions. And generally, it's a positive perception that happens through these projects. A lot of the community members that we get the privilege of working alongside have been told that they live in a bad place, that it's not a good neighborhood, and that no one would ever come here. Through this process, I think folks are reminded that they have beautiful neighbors and they have beautiful spaces, and that they can work together to really start to highlight some of these things. We've also learned a few lessons over the past few years on what this work takes and what it means. And the first lesson learned is that it is not easy. There are barriers that have been put in place by humans, and we often come across these and see what it is that's holding community members back. One particular barrier, as is shown in this case, is special events permitting. A lot of times the process is so convoluted and it's so confusing, and you don't even know where to begin. And if you're a community member who just wants to do something amazing for your neighborhood, this could be something that can really shut you down. So through our process, we try to identify those barriers, and we work really closely with city staff to say, can we start to remove some of these, or what would it look like if we maybe went about this a little bit differently? We also realize that sometimes you build for Instagram. And by that, we mean that we believe folks deserve places that they want to show off, deserve places that they want others to come to and to visit. And that we try to work alongside them to really bring out the artists and bring out the fabricators and show what could be in this space. And most importantly, we build for love and not for fear. So often in this work that we do, and whenever I talk about it, the first question I get is, what if someone destroys it? Or what if someone comes along and does this or does that? We build for the communities who are there, and not all the what ifs that we as humans are so amazing at coming up with. And I think a lot of times what we're realizing is those what ifs start to go away as the community really makes their voices heard. And that is what we work on here at the Better Block. Thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful. Krista, thank you so much. And we're just going to do some screen sharing switch up. While that is happening, I want to thank you. Fantastic presentation. And also now hand things over to Michelle from the Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. And her work is going to explore how we can let go of preconceived roles and timelines and instead respond with empathy to real challenges as they arise. So Michelle, over to you. Thank you. Oh, Michelle, I believe you're muted. If you're able to unmute. It's inevitable, right? Every presentation, it's
Are you able to see my first slide?
yes, we can see your slide and we can hear you, which is
Okay.
fantastic. Great.
Great.
Thanks so much.
I'm here to talk about some work that the Alliance to End Homelessness in the Capital Region, also known as the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, did with engaging people sheltering out of doors in Central Park. It was a participatory action engagement. Before I do that, I would like to acknowledge with great respect and appreciation that this engagement took place on the ancestral homelands of the Lekwungen people. This includes the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and it is with deepest gratitude from our heart that we acknowledge these peoples. As well, there are 7 other First Nations group on the South Island that we work with. We also wish to thank the park people for providing us with the opportunity to present our work and the methods that we used. We also want to acknowledge our peer researchers and the community, all of whom participated, as well as the City of Victoria and the Victoria City Council who funded the project. We must also acknowledge that the work that I am presenting today was done in August 2020 through March 2021 during a triple health threat crisis: the lack of housing and homelessness crisis. Someone experiencing homelessness, chronic homelessness, is expected to live only 44 to 49 years. The drug supply poisoning crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. To let you know a little bit about the work we do, not only do we include, we listen to and amplify the voice of lived experience in our work. We know that it is imperative to the success of our work. To that end, we would like to share some voices of individuals who are staying at Central Park and 940 Caledonia Avenue, who were asked about the difference between staying at Central Park and the self-managed and supported encampments.
Anyhow, Darren, Colin, Rita, Martina, and Eric talked about the space that they had moved to and were able to share. You will be able to see this when you click on the video link on the slide deck that will be shared later on. Right now, can I share the link? I will share the link at the end of my presentation. So When this work was done, we found ourselves in unprecedented times. Sheltering in parks and encampments brought many experiences of homelessness to all the residents of Victoria. The initial purpose of this engagement was described in a motion adopted by the City of Victoria on September 3rd of 2020 and 2021 and was 2020 and was to engage people sheltering outdoors and the surrounding neighborhoods to work together to collaboratively create solutions to the challenges and concerns due to the varied outdoor sheltering locations across the city. Further, this engagement was to be used to inform city actions and policy regarding future encampment guidelines, designs, and operations. We began the project by recruiting and training a cohort of individuals with lived and a living experience of homelessness to become peer researchers. During the first training sessions, we received a bit of training of our own. One person invited us to grab onto their belt loop, and he would show us how to talk with people in the parks. Further, the people we were engaging with were championed for encouraging people at the varied sites to step into this kind of engagement. And this person was one of the first people to set up a new site with the purpose of supporting the efforts to trial a more dispersed model. From the initial training, a core group of 8 peer researchers elected to continue engagement. The team was excited to engage with persons at Central Park and other sites to validate the findings of initial interview and questionnaires, including hosting focus groups with house neighbors. On November 2020, the second wave of COVID hit and caused us to reevaluate the scope of our project, which was originally to include all of the encampments in the Capital Regional District. We were limited to a single encampment, which was in Central Park in Victoria. We had just reconvened the talking circles at Central Park, December 2020, to have a flooding event. There we found ourselves unexpectedly being able to research, document, and participate in the development of a self-managed and supported encampment, as well as subsequent decampment processes. People needed to move as the city began a tiny home development at the site. So what we started with was looking at all of the encampments in the Victoria region. Then we had to go down to the City of Victoria. Following that, because, Central Park, because Central Park flooded, we had to go to 940 Caledonia. And then after that, 940 Caledonia became tiny homes and a tiny village. So all of those people needed to move from there. So we decamped several times, which you can see is a problem that continues to bedevil all people working in this sector. We did learn many lessons from the setup and decampment of 940 Caledonia, and we do use those to inform recommendations for encampments and transitions to outdoor sheltering sites. Oops, sorry, still on this one. We believe these learnings will facilitate smoother transitions and reduce a sense of isolation individuals reported experiencing upon moving inside, and result in more individuals to be more supported to maintain their housing and facilitate improved health and wellness outcomes. We also created reports, go back a slide, that will be links to. One that that details the training, question, and theme development, research validation processes and timeline, as well as a summary report that talks about the resulting self-managed encampments. Relentless support for the community was demonstrated across the city at various outdoor sheltering locations. At Central Park, members of the North Park Neighborhood Association were making relationships with people sheltering there, and it was absolutely wonderful to see. A senior prepared and delivered sandwiches from tent to tent and continued to do this when the encampment moved from Central Park to 940 Caledonia, which is a hardscape. We connected with the North Park Neighborhood Association and Central Park residents. Starting September 16th, 2020, we established weekly talking circles at Royal Athletic Park, which was right beside Central Park. Through these meetings, a friendship barbecue with a collaborative art project and speakers panel was conceived, planned, and delivered by the North Park Neighborhood Association and the peer researchers. Further, the North Park Neighborhood Association wrote and was awarded a Red Cross grant to support the Central Park residents to facilitate the purchase of supplies, stipends, and to support self-management and staffing, and a warming tent when the encampment moved to 940 Caledonia. Throughout the experience of sheltering outdoors, peers supported each other, both at Central Park and 940 Caledonia. People are waiting for someone to offer them supports again and again until they are ready. You need to be ready for people to be ready. We need staffing solutions for our encampments to show how we can come up with solutions. Give us the space to do it. The security, the monitoring, warming tents, safety. We need stipends for people to staff. We don't want other people doing this for us. Individuals sheltering at Central Park called in to address the City Council and share this idea on November 12th, 2020. We also have a link to the address that the Victoria City Council had, and it's on a report. So we can also share that with you. Early on, it became apparent that the initial 6-week blank that we were given for the engagement would not be enough time. Before starting to collect any information, we needed to engage, recruit, and train peer researchers and come to a shared understanding about the project. A significant outcome from this participatory action engagement was understanding and implementing the process of relational best practices. This process results in trust building and relationships. The trust built at the beginning is the foundation for the relationship, allowing for safety to explore collaborative and creative solutions. When an engagement process goes slow at the beginning to build trust and to build relationships, it also often takes less time to implement the actions. Further, we used many of the best practices for engagement with people with lived and living experience of homelessness, which can be found on one of the pages in our report. The momentum of the participatory action engagement team achieved was done in an ever-changing and at times stressful environment. The unprecedented increase in temporary sheltering locations created many shifts for the population sheltering outdoors. Additionally, there was a fire at one of the temporary sheltering hotels, causing a disruption in access to indoor sheltering locations for those who were still sheltering in parks. So there was no movement from the parks to some of the indoor sheltering that we were offering. Also, bylaw enforcement was a top stressor for individuals sheltering outdoors. At the beginning of the engagement, the manager of bylaw services was taking the learnings from previous decampments in Victoria to create a more effective communication tool. There was also a further stressor. December 2020, in Central Park, there was a flooding event. Had to evacuate the park on a dime, causing everyone involved in the project to have to pivot again. However, this did create a really wonderful opportunity for people to feel safe, dry, and in community with the move to 940 Caledonia. It was a hardscape and it was not prone to flooding. Now, throughout this entire engagement, COVID-19 was a key concern because of the population that we were working with and ourselves being exposed to COVID-19. As precautions were taken, there was a significant impact to the capacity to expand the scope to all of the parks and meet the initial 6-week deadline for the project. We found many communication challenges during the project. Many people sheltering outdoors did not have access to email or electricity to charge their cell phones. Most of the time it was word of mouth that was the key method for communication. Some peers would get the scoop and then pass information on to others. If you have ever played that game of telephone as a child, you have seen firsthand how this kind of communication distorts messaging. So there were times when communication would be distorted or even misrepresented, leading to mistrust and confusion in an already often intense environment. Sheltering outdoors where basic needs and staying warm were a priority does require a lot of work. Keeping to a regular schedule is not easy. So it is not surprising that not everyone involved in engagement or talking circles was able to attend regular meetings. We needed to meet people where they were at. Some of the information that we collected across a paper and pencil questionnaire that was collaboratively designed with the peer researchers and also through a collaboration. Step back for a second. So we created a paper and pencil questionnaire. Through the collaboration with our peer researchers, we were able to survey those sheltering outdoors at Central Park. As well, North Park Neighborhood Association, through their online presence and list of community members, provided us with a way to survey the North Park residents. Data collected through surveying the residents of Central Park, as well as North Park residents, demonstrated that communication was a key priority identified by everyone that was surveyed. It was amplified by interview and survey results from peer researchers and persons living in the community. Examples of the recommendations for and issues with communications included regular updates needed to be made to the city and service provider websites, as well as social media, especially when the changes were made to bylaw or service access. Access to technology such as internet, mobile phones, and computers is necessary to ensure persons receive updated information, and there needs to be, a way to ensure that people are able to access mobile devices. The need for communication is not limited to outdoor sheltering locations. It is imperative that clear communication exists for persons moving into all housing types and is presented across multiple platforms such as handwritten notices, message boards, social media, and websites. There were many things that went well at the self-managed and supported encampment. People reported feelings of community, support, and safety. That being said, there was no one organization responsible for being a point of contact at 940 Caledonia, especially at the start. Various partners held different roles. We had the Orange Backpacks from Island Health come in, North Park Neighborhood Association, BC Housing, had representatives, just a lot of people, and there was no framework. It was very challenging for the folks who were living on site, as some needed to become the sole point of contact. Of course, the surrounding neighborhood found this very challenging. However, eventually there was a rhythm, trust and settling created. Loud noise at night was managed. One of the residents talked about how impressed they were with their such large, diverse, and strong-willed group of people that were able to get along so well. They were also able to have Care Resources Victoria Society on site 7 days a week. This deeply supported the rhythm and settling of the site. So having other peers come into the site helped. Recommendations for this site included the creation of a coordinating body, ideally through consensus, to work with partners on the development of a shared accountability framework for any undertaking of this nature. That would ensure clear roles and responsibilities are in place to keep things going smoothly and to get ahead of issues, not to be reactive. This was echoed in the lessons learned report from the North Park Neighborhood Association. Sometimes it feels like solutions were too late, like the permits for the warming tent or waiting until after people until after Central Park flooded and we had to move people.
Michelle, I'm just going to jump in and give you about a 2-minute or so warning. I know there's such great information here. Just
Oh, the next two
be
slides are
mindful.
really small. So,
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah.
okay, so we found ourselves in the decline of the third wave of the pandemic with an agreement between the city and province to support everyone who wishes to be sheltered indoors. And we were preparing to reinstate the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. camping prohibition bylaw to come into effect. If sheltering outdoors 24/7 ever again becomes a transitional solution, there needs to be mechanisms in place to streamline the process and ensure smooth operations of the site. A further recommendation is the review of current emergency response plans. There are response plans in every community that include sheltering outdoors to see if these can be adapted to include individuals experiencing homelessness. Even the best laid plans are need tweaking along the way. Most importantly, we need to approach any potential encampment solution with a mindset of cooperation, curiosity, and compassion. So, our framework was developed and used by the Alliance Coalition to collaborate with the peer researchers and community members. Peer researchers were employed to conduct the engagement. Our engagement provided peer researchers, both housed and those sheltering outdoors, with a way to be fully engaged and empowered. There was training provided to participate in the engagement as a researcher, not as a person to have knowledge extracted from. A voice through the co-development of interview protocols, focus group protocols, and survey questionnaires, and a way to give voice to what information was collected, how it was collected, and how it is discussed and being presented. One peer researcher commented on the relationship to the work of this engagement. This report is where we start from. All of this work, we don't start at the bottom. We already have the information. This engagement, as is the work with the Alliance to End Homelessness in the Capital Region, is all about relationship building. The engagement was participatory in nature, involving all of those who were touched by one particular encampment in Victoria to have a say. We focused on those whose voices have been and continue to be marginalized. After all, when you use a participatory action framework, we strive to engage voices of those who are marginalized, noting that the work takes the time it takes, not less. This particular participatory action engagement did not delve into the broader cultural connection that includes an understanding of parks as traditional homes and potentially sacred sites for Indigenous peoples, where cultural resource management and community collaboration with local First Nations needs to be a consideration for park programming and development. As Lisa Crossman, my dear colleague, wisely suggests, unhoused communities as well as Indigenous communities are connected to a landscape in a very intimate way. Yet these groups and individuals are often excluded from meaningful consultation about that land. They're also the communities for whom the idea of data sovereignty, making good on promises, is especially critical. So we need to build relationship with all of those we wish to engage with. To do this, we must respect their wishes, dreams, desires, and their safety. Knowing that it takes the time it takes to use a participatory action research framework in community-based research. And sorry for the rocky beginning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. Wonderful presentation, very rich. And to our last presenters, Michael and Sasha from the Community Data Program, their work talks about giving communities access to usable tools and information to support their work. And in those cases, when cost isn't a barrier, to look at how we can pay for that ourselves and then get out of the way to let community organizers and grassroots organizations do their work. So Michael, Sasha, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks again to Parks people, as well as the fellow presenters. Really learned a lot from the previous two presentations and looking forward to the discussion afterwards. So again, my name is Sasha Mosky, and I'll be presenting with my colleague, Mike Deiter. We'll talk a little bit about our organization, the Community Data Program, as well as some of the tools and data that the Community Data Program offers. So what is the Community Data Program? So the Community Data Program has been around for approximately 25 years in some form or another, and we're a national data access program that focuses on facilitating access to data to practitioners looking at the community level. So it's a cost-sharing model designed to facilitate access to customized, disaggregated data at the local level. And as well, we offer a suite of services to help practitioners and local level community organizations make use of that data, understand it, and use it to tell local level stories. So the services the Community Data Program offers are really focused through three different priority areas. So the first one, of course, is our data. So we provide access to hundreds of different data tables that we acquire from sources like Statistics Canada and CMHC that are unique to the Community Data Program and reflect the needs of practitioners working at the local level. We also offer a range of different capacity building services and events. And so this is anything from data access tools and dashboards that make it a little bit easier for someone to go in and access credible data from something like the census, to webinars and other training sessions that actually will teach people how to take data, manipulate it, turn it into a visualization, and use that data to tell local level stories. And then finally, we are a national network made up of small and large organizations across the country. And so through that, we can offer different networking sessions that allow practitioners working on similar issues at the local level to come together and discuss how data can really be a part of informing policy and program design. So the Community Data Program, as I mentioned, is a national organization. We have a unique model called the Consortium model that enables a lead organization to form a consortium. So like it's geographically based, and then any organization within the geography is eligible for membership. So for example, often a large organization such as say the City of Toronto will be the lead organization, and then any organization with a social service or nonprofit mandate is eligible for membership. So I'm sure there's many in the audience today who are eligible for membership with the Community Data Program. So I definitely encourage you to check out our website or reach out to Mike or myself if you're interested in joining. And then once your organization has a membership with the Community Data Program, any individual, so be that an employee or a volunteer, is able to create a user account and then go into the data catalog and actually access any of the data tables, any of our tools or resources or trainings for themselves. So as I said, we are a national network. Any of the kind of tan shaded polygons are where our consortium currently are. So if your organization falls within any of these boundaries, you're likely eligible for membership with a Community Data Program. And then just some examples of who are our members. So anything from, municipalities, big and small across the country, school boards, public health agencies, small community nonprofits, really any organization with a public sector or social service mandate is, and that works at the community level, is eligible for membership. So I just wanted to quickly talk about how our membership fees are structured. Data is expensive, and cost can be a barrier, especially for smaller organizations to access some of the customized small level geography that we specialize in at the CDP. And so the consortium-based model is a tool that enables smaller organizations to access data at a reduced cost. So the Community Data Program is really about sharing the cost of data, where larger organizations like, such as, City of Toronto or any kind of larger municipality might have more capacity to pay, which enables organizations in that local community who might not have, who are working with smaller budgets to access that same level of data and service and tools to tell those like localized stories. So this model that we have developed is really about creating self-sufficiency and allows the community data program to be financially independent and continue to grow. So the program was previously funded through a federal grant, but that money was pulled in 2011 with change of government. And so the consortium model does allow us to be independent and really respond to the needs of practitioners that we're working with on the ground. And Mike heads the data purchase and access group, so we'll engage with practitioners working in communities across Canada to really understand what their data needs are, and then turn to Statistics Canada or CMHC and communicate those needs, and then create customized data products that can respond to the questions that are being asked locally. So now I'll just pass it over to my colleague, Mike, who is going to talk a little bit more about some of the data products that we get, as well as some of the tools and other training and resources that we have. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Sasha. Here, I will take over screen sharing. So you can see my screen. There's a lot on here. Let me just turn this into a slideshow. So I can talk a little bit about the types of data that we get. We try not to be too rigid in looking at what we're going to get. We get a lot of feedback from members, from our working group, from leads. This covers a fairly wide range of what we could get, but we recognize that with coming up on 400 member organizations, that people's needs are quite varied, and we try to get data that can help maximize benefit for the most number of users and members. Thinking about what is available through the program. When we buy data, we are buying data for all of Canada. So that does limit our providers to organizations like Statistics Canada, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. There are some private vendors that we deal with that have data that covers all of Canada. The main criteria that we're looking for is that the data are available at the municipal scale. And so that's looking at the city, which is a census subdivision, or at the regional or county level. That's, with few exceptions, that's what we're looking for. And then ideally, we want to be delving deeper so that people can look at their neighborhoods or see variation across neighborhoods within a city. And so that's talking about dissemination areas or census tracts. And what we are acquiring, we do point to open data and data that is freely available, but we generally are focused on data that are customized tables. In one way or another, what we're getting is a customization. We're looking at what is not free. We take some of the free data tables that are available on Statistics Canada's website and get them at smaller geographic levels, so you can look at the city or at the neighborhood level. We come up with completely custom tabulations. Additionally, we will also get custom geographies for our members. They want to look at their ward or a service delivery area or any other geography that is not customized to, that is not standard to Statistics Canada. And we shepherd them through that process to get those geographies set up in the production system so we can get a handful of tables and really look at geographies that are of meaning to our members. And yes, we get a lot of data. Some of this is in a format called IVT tables, which is a data dissemination format used a lot by StatsCan. Comes in Excel tables, or we use the software Tableau to create infographics and dashboards. So there's just a little peek at the interface. We have a catalog. Once you're a member, then you simply click on the Find Data button, and you've access to our entire catalog. We do find that easily upwards of 50% of our members could be classified as having modest data capacity, and that is a function of skills with working with data, or just the time. Some people just are doing this off the side of their desk. They don't have time to spend working with complex data tables, finding what they need and getting it out. So we do as much as we can to bring people along. And this has really been one of the key initiatives that the program has been putting forward over the past, we're going on 10 years now, trying to find ways to get data into the hands of users that wouldn't normally have access to data and wouldn't normally have the skills or the time to use it. And so, this diagram here just shows sort of what you can do with data. We like to talk a lot about taking data and turning it into intelligence, or turning it into some sort of actionable intelligence. So we can bring you up to a certain point, and then it's obviously for you to take it a little bit further with your local knowledge and to take those actions.
Michael, we have about 2 minutes or so. I know we've got a few more slides, but just giving you a heads up.
Sure, I'll turn off my alarm now. That was going to tell me that I'm running out of time.
Ever the stage manager, yeah.
Thank you for that. One of the ways that we have been trying to get data into the hands of our members is we are relying somewhat heavily on tools such as dashboards, which can just easily put all the data. Currently, you have to go into our catalog, find the data, find your geography, pull it out, get it into Excel, and then come up with whatever visualization you might have had in mind. In this case, we've done a lot of that for you. So the community recovery dashboard was a tool that we came up with to sort of show the very unequal recoveries that are coming out after due to some of the pandemic impacts. We have a number of different data sets that are available through Tableau. It's a housing dashboard that was the result of a collaboration with CMHC, talking with data practitioners across the country. But we do get a lot of feedback from our working groups and our leads, and our members just have an open line of communication with us directly. And webinars, we offer a lot of information sessions to try to help people through the process of using the program itself, using the data, or just as indicated, transforming data into intelligence. What have other people done with data? What are some of the options, what you can do with the data that we have, and what else is out there? This is a great opportunity to engage with our members and to allow members to engage and network with each other. The chat boxes are open, and people are talking in there about what they're doing and making connections. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we've got some contact information up there if you're interested. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And definitely there's a lot of ideas that are popping up into my head. A lot of this connecting to some work that I'm doing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And on that note, we're going to open it up to our Q&A session. And thanks for everyone who has put in questions already in the Q&A chat. Again, feel free to continue to add questions into the Q&A box. And if we don't answer them here, we'll be sure to follow up. I'm going to jump right in and start with some questions that Jane has brought up in the Q&A box. And she mentions the difficulty that organizations have with running programs, getting permits, and also insurance when running social programs. And also specifically talks about how she finds that there's a lot of red tape in trying to hold community events that include all aspects of our society. So she is asking for some suggestions that you may have for organizations across Canada, not just the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area, with respect to red tape reduction. And I think to start off, Krista, I might go to you first. I know it touches on everyone's work, but from your experience, can you add any additional insights on how to navigate that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I am so sorry. I didn't even mention the project that we worked on in Toronto. So apologies. I saw you're on the line. So good to see you and had so much fun working with you on that. We worked with 880 cities on a project a few years ago on Danforth Avenue. And the permitting process and the red tape there was fascinating. I remember a very specific moment where we were trying to get a permit through. So in the projects that we're doing, we don't shut down streets to traffic normally because that's not really a realistic end goal for a project like that. We're really trying to show how you can redesign a space to make it safer. And just shutting down a street to traffic is not going to be the long-term implementation or plan. So I remember a meeting where they were really struggling with that and how we could do an event but still keep traffic going. And sometimes you just got to get really creative. So we started pitching it as an art installation and said, it's an art installation that just so happens to have bikes rolling through. They shut that down. We tried it as a film permit. We tried to go for like, hey, we're just going to film a movie, and it just so happens to be a bike lane, and they shut that one down. And then we went for construction zone, and maybe we could have some cones out. And there was some talk going back and forth about whether or not you could actually have traffic in a construction zone. And we're like, well, you have trucks, so it works. So I will say though, 880 cities were huge in getting that permit. And I remember the moment we got it, and it was a good moment. All that to say, it's tough. And so we have not found anyone who does it really well, but we are looking for that model, and if there's a way to apply it across cities and countries in general. And the way we get through it so many times is tenacity, being really obnoxious with emails and phone calls. And we always try in our projects to find an internal city advocate at the very beginning before we've even started anything, and make them kind of our champion and give them a heads up about what's about to happen. Our work is very, very, very fast. And so that's very uncomfortable for all cities we work with. And so there is a lot that goes into that. There is also some beauty sometimes in us being outsiders, because sometimes the city staff does want to try something. They do want to do something different, but they're a little concerned about the blowback of that. And I always tell community members and I tell city staffers, use us. I can take the hits. I don't mind, whatever, like it's okay. And we'll work through it, and I can work with folks. And so I know that's not the best answer. I will say there is one place outside of Auckland in New Zealand. They asked me a question that I literally did not have an answer to, which was, if you didn't have to worry about permitting, what would you do with your time and your money? Because they are working on creating a system where the communities can go out and make these changes and make it easier for everyone. And so I told them, it's not what we would do, because as an organization at that point, we don't need to exist. It's what would you allow, like what doors are you opening to community members to go out and make their own changes? So just be creative and be tenacious. And if you ever want to commiserate with me or share stories, I'm here. You can send me a note.
Perfect. Thank you. And on a similar note, there was another comment from Emily about how that she finds convincing colleagues of the administration is harder than the mobilization of the community. So that internal advocacy and collaboration. And for this note, I'm actually going to look to Michelle, and I don't know if you have any insights that you can share on your work when you're trying to manage to work and convince the administration to engage in your projects and the changes that are needed to respond to what you are seeing and experiencing from the community.
Great question. And I was thinking about that and making myself a few notes because first off, we are a coalition / alliance that was formed in 2008. The people I work with now and those who have gone before me have worked tirelessly to forge relationship across the Capital Regional District, which includes 13 different municipalities. Our board is comprised of persons from BC Housing, Island Health, the municipal government, and one or more mayors from the municipalities. We have a health and housing steering committee. We have a lived and living experience council. We have someone that is specifically tasked with engagement and collaboration across the community. So through a lot of work, we've gone through this. We've adopted what's called the Victoria Declaration, which is nothing about us without us, which I just heard today in another webinar that I was attending that was hosted by the United Nations that talked about nothing about us without us. And noting that it takes the time that it takes and continually engaging on a monthly or bi-monthly basis with our Health and Housing Steering Committee, with our lived and living experience council, having board meetings, just always out there and talking. I go out and myself in community. I'm a researcher. I'm supposed to be one of those people that would prefer to be behind my desk, just, typing away and looking at numbers. And I go out and talk to other people about the data that they have, about what things we can do with that. So we're always, always, always continually talking with all of the members. For the Central Park work that we did, we were just very fortunate to have Mayor Lisa Helps, who was a strong proponent for this. We continue to be an organization that pushes advocacy and engagement. And we have we made sure that we have a really strong communications person. So those are just some of the things that we do to ensure that we can convince. We make people part of the group.
Excellent, thank you. And to make sure that we're covering all the different perspectives in this conversation, I'm going to jump to a data-related question because I'm sure we can all respect and understand how sometimes making those arguments, building those relationships, the advocacy, navigating red tape, many politicians or city staff, they want the data, they want the information. And so the question that came up for the community data program was how do you teach users about how to avoid errors in their data selection and presentation? So helping to guide what data to collect, how to display it. Any thoughts that you can share on that, Michael or Sasha?
Yeah, I can jump in. So when obviously there's so much data out there, everyone's always confronted with data, and so a lot of the times, people come to us and they don't even know where to start to look. And so what we try and encourage people to do is start by asking questions and we'll work with practitioners to pose those questions. And then from there, you can start to narrow down what data sets are available. And so you're not just like sorting through data, looking for, answers or, trying to look for trends or something that you don't even know kind of what you're questioning and what you're trying to solve. So really when you approach it through asking questions and being inquiring about what this data can actually bring an answer, because there is a lot of data out there. So that's how we sort of approach, looking through all the data that's available. And then some of the tools that we have too through our dashboards and, our webinar series are tools to help narrow down that, the range of different data sources that are out there. I don't know, Mike, if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think that sums it up. Trying to make sure that we get at the question that they're asking, whether the data is there or not. what is the core question, and can that immediately be answered with the data that's available? And if not, then going from there and seeing what can be done to get to a proxy, to get to finding the appropriate source. But as far as teaching people, it is in many times, we try to reach as many people as we can, all at once with webinars or tools, but there is a lot of one-on-one and just talking with people.
Great. And just continuing on that thread about data, do you have any suggestions about how to convince local park officials on the importance to collect basic data about park use? And this would be data such as number of visitors, popular routes, features in the park, from where visitors come from, etc. And John rather, continues to say, at our park, the only park use data that volunteers can access are the numbers we collect ourselves. We lack basic numbers of how many people visit the site over a day, a month, a season, or a year. Any suggestions? And again, that is convincing local park officials on the importance of collecting basic data. Have you or anyone in your consortiums have had any experience with that?
I think that we aren't really much dealing anymore with gathering that kind of data. When we were, the biggest thing that convinced, we had an initiative that we were doing for another organization that required getting data from various municipalities. And what really pushed people was just the thought that this data is going to be published. And I'm not sure how well that answer applies to the particular situation that the question that the person who posed the question is dealing with, but indicating that we are going to be publishing something about this park. We're going to be publishing something that in some way implicates one of your responsibilities. So do you want to participate in that with your insights, with your information, with your resources? That's where people really were motivated to jump in, knowing that there was going to be a publication that could come back to them through their supervisor. This is going to be put out into the news. There's going to be a question that's going to come up in council. So they need to be on top of that information, and that really motivated people.
Perfect. Great. And another somewhat data related question, but going back to Better Block and Krista, a note about for the increase in street life, how was that quantified or measured through your projects? And was the data you collected specific to the activation itself or in the event, or was it over a longer period of time? I hope I captured that question correctly. If not, please let me know. But yes, just would you like me to repeat it, Krista, or?
No, you're good. You're good. So technically both. We do measure, how many folks are in an area. Whenever we do an activation, obviously we know, like, we've got music, food, entertainment. There's a lot of excitement. So we're going to have a lot of people that weekend. So what we do is we go back to our partners every other year for as long as they'll continue to answer our questions. And we ask them, what have you seen change? What's going on in the area? So we just finished another round of that, and we'll be putting out some new information. But in that, we're going back to both community members who helped lead the projects and then also city staffers who helped with the projects as well. And it's based on their reporting and what they're saying.
Perfect. Go ahead.
One other thing on trying to convince folks. So that one of the last images I showed was this illustration, and that was actually based off of 11 pages of notes that we had gathered trying to go through a special event permitting process for a park in a city here in America. And the different city departments didn't fully understand what they were asking of each applicant. And so we took all of those notes and all the process and everything that was happening and turned it over to the illustrator and said, can you draw what this looks like? And that actually was a very useful tool to take back to city staff and to the council members and to say, this is what you're asking the community to do. And this is why people are very frustrated. They actually took that feedback and they went from 2 people to 9 people in that department. They changed the portal that folks were working with to go through it. And I had some feedback from community members that it really had kind of changed some of the conversations that they were having. So it didn't fix everything, but we did find it to be a pretty good tool to use.
Excellent, great. And I know we are coming close to time, but there was one other comment, and I would love to hear all of your reflections on this. And this was from your presentation, Krista, and it was the quote about how you aim to build for love, not for fear. And so the question to each of you, if you have some thoughts to share on it, is how do we as organizations or practitioners in this field face our fears of doing it wrong? That, you know, we might be gentrifying instead of making neighborhoods better or what have you. How do we overcome that fear of doing things wrong? And I might, just to switch it up, Michelle, start with you, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. Any thoughts on how we can navigate that?
I'm old, and I will admit that right now, but there are still elders that I listen to, and we are very fortunate in the capital region in Victoria, the Victoria area, that for most of the sessions and engagements that we have an elder start from one of the local communities, the Esquimalt, the Songhees, sometimes the Tsarlip, and they talk about the fact that we all make mistakes. And to understand that when you're collecting information, when you're talking to people, you try as hard as you can to find out what question and what concerns they have, and to be able to accurately find the information that will help answer that question. But every day there's new information about collecting information. There's new information about how to analyze information. There's new information on best practices. There's new information from elders. There's new information about reconciliation, about everything. So what we do is we do the best that we can. We go at the speed that we can, and just accept that we are all human, and even AI makes mistakes.
Excellent. Sasha or Michael, any thoughts to share on how to avoid that fear of doing it wrong?
I mean, I'll just go quickly, maybe if you don't mind, Mike, but I think, like, you know, data can be really overwhelming for people. People don't really know where to start. There's a lot out there. And I think that, you know, in the kind of age of misinformation, people are afraid of putting out statistics or data that might be interpreted as wrong or misrepresent a population. And so I think at the Community Data Program, we, you know, try to work with practitioners to break it down into smaller steps and kind of demystify the process of working with data. And, you know, as Michelle said, just like, it is okay to make mistakes, but it's better to just, you know, go ahead and do and try, and not be, put yourself out there and feel that you can actually do it and use the data in a way that is meaningful and can represent a community in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as Michelle said, sort of applying this in, more practical. We're talking about data. It's very important to understand that mistakes are always made, and you should assume with any table that you have, with any work that you've done, that there is an error in there. And so the big part of it is sharing. I think to avoid worrying about making mistakes is share from the beginning. Share your work as you go. So it's consulting with people, as I see someone is writing in the comments, but just getting more eyes on the work that you're doing, and recognizing that there definitely will be mistakes, and you'll get the feedback. The errors will be found sooner. The sooner you start talking to people and assuming that you're putting the errors out there. Get them out for other people to see.
Thank you. And Krista, any closing thoughts?
Yeah. So, everything we do is about creating spaces alongside people. And so letting them kind of be the ones to take the charge on that and how things will come together. We have an idea in our mind. We have our construction documents. We know where each chair goes and where each piece of art is going to be. But the most fascinating part is the moment when we're done. And by done, I mean, it's placed. We know that it's going to move, but we take a step back and we just start to watch. We created these benches out of tires that had a little topper on it. We thought they were benches. That's what they were supposed to be. But immediately the kids started jumping on them and using them as trampolines, and they just took on a whole other life. And I think that's a big part of this work as you're working in public spaces and parks and even streets. It's how do people actually use that space, and how do people want to use that space, and being willing to take that step back, take yourself out of it, and just observe.
Amazing. Oh, I wish we had more time to keep digging into this. Lots of great information shared. And I'm just going to have Wes on standby to talk about just future steps with Park people and programming. So Wes, over to you.
Thank you so much. What a great conversation today. And I just want to let the audience know, if you found today's conversation helpful, we encourage you to consider registering for our Park People 2023 conference coming up in June from the 21st to the 23rd here in Toronto, Canada.